Shalom, welcome everybody. This is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Be'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. And today we're learning Talmud, lessons in Talmud. We're learning how to study the Talmud, and we're making use of the beautiful Koren Talmud Bavli edition, the Adin Steinsaltz, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz edition, which is very beautiful. As you'll see in front of you, you can follow along with me as we read the original text as it appears in the Gemara itself, as well as following along with my own personal translation, and of course, the translation that you see on the side of the page. This is not the standard form of what the page looks like on a page of Talmud, but instead of using that, what we have in front of us is an easy way to digest the various parts of the Gemara. It helps us to clarify and understand each section as we move along. And we're busy studying the very first Gemara of the Talmud, which is called Gemara Tractate Brachot, which deals with blessings. And where we've left off so far is with regards to this first Mishnah, which is trying to establish the correct time for the recitation of the Keriat Shema. And we're talking about, in particular, the Keriat Shema in the evening. Now, the Gemara has gone into some depth over here so far on the first page, Daf Base. We're still on Amud Aleph, the first side of the page. And the Gemara has gone into a bit of depth with regards to understanding the correct time of the evening Shema, and how the Gemara is deducing even how there is a mitzvah to recite the Keriat Shema in the first instance. Obviously, the Gemara began with the Mishnah and said, from when do we start reciting the Keriat Shema? In the evening. And that's all very well and good to say. But who said there was a mitzvah altogether to recite the Keriat Shema? If we're going to say you've got to start reciting the Keriat Shema at a particular time, we must also establish that there is indeed a mitzvah to recite the Keriat Shema in the first instance. So what happened is as follows. Where we got to last week is that I'm just doing a quick revision over here on the last few lines of this part of the page, where it says Tana Akrai Ka'ei, that the Tana, the teacher of the Mishnah, was actually basing himself upon a verse. Because the verse says, B'shoch baka uvakumecha. It says, in your lying down and in your rising. And these are indeed the words that we recite in the Keriat Shema. This is where we get the mitzvah of reciting the Keriat Shema twice a day, when we go to sleep and when we wake up. And so therefore, because in the written Torah, it says the words, B'shoch baka uvakumecha, when you lie down and when you rise up. So therefore it said, Zman Keriat Shema dishkiva emas. The Gemara asked a question. The time for the recitation of the Keriat Shema, when we lie down, when is that time? Answer, it's at that time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. And we discussed last week exactly who the Kohanim are and what the truma is that they need to eat, that they're going to eat, and that they're going to basically purify themselves before they eat the truma. And therefore, when they're totally pure and they can begin to eat the truma, this mitzvah that they can fulfill, that is the same time that the Chachamim are telling us that already we can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening. And then afterwards, the Gemara continued and said, Ve'ibas ema, if you want, I can give you another reason. In other words, if you're not satisfied with the first reason, well, I can give you another proof as to why it is that we are required to recite the Keriat Shema in the evening, and then afterwards we're going to discuss that there's a mitzvah to recite the Keriat Shema in the morning. And the answer is because Yalif mibriaso shel olam. We can learn this out from the creation of the world. Tiksiv, because it's written in the pasuk in the Torah right at the beginning of our Chumash. It says, Vayihi erev, vayihi voker yom echad. It was evening and it was morning one day, which means to say that we don't have to learn out the mitzvah of reciting the Keriat Shema from the fact that we say, B'shoch baka uvakumecha, when you lie down and when you rise, because there's another way to understand that there is a mitzvah that we should first start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening and then the morning, and that is because the day begins in the evening. And we also discussed, we showed the different times of the day using a very beautiful site called mazmanim.com, and it's very clear that we can learn exactly when the time is, and we'll learn further on exactly what that time is. So the second proof that we have here Ibais ema, if you want, say, which means if you're not satisfied with the first answer, because the truth is we're going to prove that this first answer is not sufficient grounds to prove the recitation of the Keriat Shema first in the evening and then the morning. So we use another verse. And this verse says to us, Vayi erev, vayi boker, yom echad. It was evening and it was morning one day. So we see over here that we have to recite the Keriat Shema first in the evening and then the morning, because after all, the Gemara could have first started by saying to us, when do we recite the Keriat Shema in the morning, and then when do we recite the Keriat Shema in the evening? But it started off with the evening first. Reason? Because the day begins in the evening. When the Torah begins, when the Chumash begins, it says, Vayi erev, vayi boker, yom echad. It was evening and it was morning one day. First comes evening, then comes the morning. Ihachi, says the Gemara. Oh, I'll just read one note over here. On the side, it says, if you wish, you could say instead that he derives it from the creation of the world. We're looking on the side, on the left-hand side on the notes. Although the first explanation seems adequate, this is not the case, as a dispute emerges in the second chapter of this tractate as to whether the verse, and you should speak of them when you lie down and when you arise, applies specifically to the recitation of Shema or to Torah study in general. If one holds in accordance with the second opinion, meaning that this verse, which is speaking about studying Torah, meaning refers to the study of Torah, so then one cannot rely on this verse as a proof. Therefore, another proof is cited here, explaining that in any case, the evening precedes the morning, and therefore it's correct that the Tana of the Mishnah begins to teach us the order of the recitation of the Keriat Shema that first begins in the evening, and then afterwards we're going to learn about the halachot as they apply to the morning. Fine. Now the Gemara continues and says, I accept your reasoning. However, Ihachi, if so, if that's the reason that you're explaining that first comes the evening and then comes the morning, Sefer de Katani, what about a latter Mishnah that comes to teach us the following? Remember, we learned that the word Sefer means the latter or the end, as opposed to the Reisha, which is the beginning, which means that the Gemara is pointing us to another Mishnah that comes a little bit later. And over there in that Mishnah, it says the following, B'shachar mevarek shtayim lefaneha. In the morning, we recite two blessings before reciting the Keriat Shema. V'achas le'achareha, and we recite one blessing after the Keriat Shema in the morning. Then the Mishnah there continues and says, Ba'erev mevarek shtayim lefaneha. In the evening, we recite two blessings before the Keriat Shema, u'shtayim le'achareha, and two blessings afterwards. Asks the Gemara, Lisnei ta'aravis bereisha. Shouldn't the Mishnah over there that we're coming up to in shortly, a few pages ahead, we're going to see over there that maybe there it should teach the evening first. In other words, it should have taught us that in the evening we bless two blessings before the Keriat Shema, and then we bless two blessings afterwards. And in the morning we bless two blessings before the Keriat Shema and one blessing afterwards. If we're going to use the same logic, that the evening precedes the daytime in accordance with the rule, we must also use the same rule and apply it to the next Mishnah. When we discuss the order of blessings, let's begin the order in accordance with nighttime and daytime. Yet in that Mishnah, the Tana of that Mishnah comes to teach us the order as in order of the morning and in the evening. First, we're learning about the evening and the morning, and now this Mishnah comes along later on and teaches us the morning and the evening. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be constant. You've got to keep the same rules. If it's evening and morning, then it's always evening and morning. Why all of a sudden is the Tana of the next Mishnah, well, not the very next Mishnah, but the coming up Mishnah, is teaching us something about the Keriat Shema, and he begins with the day and then he ends off with the night. It doesn't seem to make sense. The Gemara continues. Tana, psach ba'arvis. This is what happens. The teacher of the Mishnah, in our case, began with the evening. Why? Because vayi erev vayi boker yom echad. Because it was evening and morning one day. So it's only correct that we should start with the evening. And quite frankly, if you don't like that reasoning, we can go back to the first reasoning. When you lie down and when you arise. So in any case, start with the evening and then afterwards, v'hadar tane b'shachris. Afterwards, we're teaching about the shachris. We're going to learn about the morning Keriat Shema. Ad deko'ei b'shachris. Now that you arrive at Shachris, Paresh Mile de Shachris. It explains all the matters as pertained to Shachris. V'hada Paresh Mile de Arvis. And afterwards, it explains all the matters that relate to the evening. So actually, the Tanas of the Mishnah were teaching us, the Tanaim of the Mishnayot, were teaching us the correct order. Since we started off with the evening, and then we proceeded to the morning, we then begin to learn about all the morning things. When we finished with the morning things, we then continue with the evening things. And so therefore there's an order. We don't have to say evening and then morning. And in the next case, evening and morning. But instead, we say evening and morning. Then we learn all about the morning things, and then we continue with the evening. And so this was the logic of what the Tanaim were coming to teach us. Now, we'll just take a very quick look over here. It says in the Rambam, Hakoirei Keriat Shema mevarech lefaneha ula'achareha. Somebody who is reciting the Keriat Shema, he must make a blessing before the Keriat Shema and after the Keriat Shema. Bayom mevarech shtayim lefaneha. In the morning, we bless 2 blessings before the Keriat Shema, va'achas la'achareha, and 1 blessing afterwards. Ubelayla, and in the evening, mevarech shtayim lefaneha, we make 2 blessings before the Keriat Shema, ushtayim la'achareha, and 2 blessings afterwards. It's clear. Somebody reading this teaching of the Rambam, Rav Moshe Maimonides, will clearly see that the Rambam clearly formulated halacha from the very words that we read in the Gemara. Let us look at the next halacha. Orakaim Reish Lamed Vav. We're looking over here at the Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch teaches us the same halacha. Din Birchos Keriat Shema Shel Arvis, the law of the bracha of Keriat Shema in the evening, and he says, Ba'erev mevarech shtayim lifnei Keriat Shema ushtayim la'achareha. In the evening, one blesses 2 blessings before the Keriat Shema and 2 blessings afterwards. So we see over here that the halakha is clear that these are the blessings that we recite on the Keriat Shema as pertains to the evening and as pertains to the morning. We continue. Omar Mar, the master said, we continue now in the Gemara itself. Mishar she'akohanim niknasim le'echol b'trumatam. We finished with that particular issue. It's clear. We've discussed starting off with the evening and the morning, and while the Tana comes to teach us the morning situation, and then afterwards the evening, we move to a new section. Mishar she'akohanim niknasim le'echol b'trumatam. At the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. Mechti, says the Gemara. Let's take a look at this. Kohanim, emas ka ochli truma. When do the Kohanim eat their truma? This is a very interesting question. Since the Gemara says to us that we're going to recite the Keriat Shema in the evening at the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma, the question we need to ask ourselves is, well, when do the Kohanim enter to eat their truma? Answer, Mishas Tzeitzah Kokavim. It's at the time that the stars come out. Fine. If that's the case, says the Gemara, that the Kohanim are going to enter to eat their truma at Tzeitzah Kokavim, which is actually the time that you should recite the Keriat Shema, Lisnei Mishas Tzeitzah Kokavim. The Mishnah should have taught straight away the correct time for reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening is Tzeitzah Kokavim, when the stars come out. Why did the Mishnah go about it in a roundabout manner? Why did the Mishnah teach us that the time to recite the Keriat Shema in the evening is when the Kohanim enter to eat their truma? So when is that? That's Tzeitzah Kokavim. Well, if it's Tzeitzah Kokavim, which is easy to understand, when the stars come out, let the Mishnah teach us. When do you recite the Keriat Shema in the evening? At Tzeitzah Kokavim. On the side over here, on the background, the commentary over here is teaching us that whenever we see this expression, the master said, Omar Mar, when the Gemara quotes a passage from a previously cited Mishnah or Braita, it introduces the passage with this honorific. This is usually followed by elucidation of several aspects of the topic under discussion. Answers the Gemara, Milta Agav Orchei Kamashmalan. The Gemara answers that it comes to teach us something by the way, through the teaching that it uses in expressing itself in the particular way that it said it. What's it coming to teach us? Kohanim emas ka ochli betruma. The Kohanim, when is that time that they eat their truma? Mishas Teitza Kokavim. It's actually at the time when the stars come out. In other words, the rabbis of the Mishnah were coming to teach us something additional. They were coming to teach us the correct time that the Kohanim can enter to eat their truma. When is that? It's Teitza Kokavim. So the Mishnah asks, when can we recite the Keriat Shema? In the evening, when the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. When is that? That's Teitza Kokavim, which means to say that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma at Teitza Kokavim. So the Mishnah wants to teach us two things. It wants to teach us the time of Keriat Shema, which is Teitza Kokavim, and it wants to teach us the time that the Kohanim can enter to eat their truma, which happens to be Teitza Kokavim, which is the same time as reciting the Keriat Shema. V'ha kamash melan, and it's coming to teach us the kapara lo ma'akva, that the kapara offering, the atonement offering, does not prevent the kohen from eating his truma, which means to say the process of purification for the kohen entails a number of steps, and in order to become pure to the fullest extent, he has to do a few things. But in terms of eating the truma, maybe there are certain things that he doesn't yet have to do, and that they can still continue onwards. Says the note on the side, failure to bring an atonement offering does not prevent him from eating truma. V'ein kaparato ma'akvato melechol betruma. The preceding verses mention among those prohibited to eat truma a zav and a leper, who are required to bring a sacrifice in order to complete their purification process. These verses also offer an explanation for the leniency that allows a priest to eat truma even though he is not completely purified. For it is his bread. Since the truma is the sustenance upon which his life depends, the Torah was not strict with him. Meaning what? Meaning that once it becomes the evening, the kohen will go to the mikvah preceding the evening, and he will then be pure in order to eat his truma. But real atonement, real purification really only takes place the next day when he offers his offering. Nevertheless, the offering does not take away from his ability to eat the truma in the evening that precedes that day. Kedetanya, as it's taught in a brisa. What does it say over there? Over here, by the way, if we look on the side over here, it was taught in a brisa, Tanya. What does the word Tanya mean, that it was taught in a brisa? The literal meaning is it was taught. This introduces a citation from a non-Mishnaic Tanaitic source. Usually, this term indicates a citation from a brisa. These sources are introduced with this term, it was taught, as opposed to the term used to introduce a Mishnah we learned, which is Tanan. The Mishnah is something that we all learned, while the brisa was taught by a limited number of people and did not gain so extensive a readership. What is the difference between a brisa and a Mishnah? The Mishnah is a powerful teaching that everybody was familiar with. It was codified, it was discussed, and it was put directly into the form of the Mishnah because people knew well what it was all about. A brisa, from the word bar, which means outside, was a teaching that was present. People knew about it, but it wasn't as well known. Nevertheless, the value of the brisa is as strong as a Mishnah. And therefore, when there is a situation of doubt about something, very often a brisa is brought in to say that there is something different, and we need to analyze the brisa in terms of the Mishnah to find out which opinion we are going to follow and why. So this is what he says here. Kidetanya, it was taught in the brisa, uba hashemish v'taher, and the sun comes and is purified. What does this expression mean? And the sun comes and it is purified. We look on the side over here where he says, as it was taught in a brisa, with regards to the laws of ritual purity, it is said, one who touches it remains impure until evening. He should not eat of the consecrated items, and he must wash his flesh with water. And the sun sets, and it is purified. Afterwards, he may eat from the truma, for it is his bread. It's a very strange expression. And the sun sets, and it is purified. Well, what exactly is purified? The sun is purified. The person is purified. It could have said, and the sun sets, and the day is pure. Or it could have said, and the sun sets, and the Kohen is pure. What does this expression mean? And the sun sets, and it is purified. How does the sun become purified? What does it mean? Bias shimsho me'akvato melechol b'truma. It's the coming of the sun that prevents him from eating the truma. Ve'ein kaparaso me'akvato melechol b'truma. And this is what we said over here. It is not the lack of him bringing the atonement offering that prevents him from eating his truma. Uba hashemesh, when the sun comes, the taher, this kohen is pure, and he may eat his truma. The absence of the setting of the sun prevents him from partaking of truma. Says the halacha, priests, meaning the kohanim, who were ritually impure and immersed themselves during the day in order to purify themselves, must wait until the emergence of 3 stars before partaking of their truma. But they don't have to worry about the kapara offering, which they have to bring the next day, which would prevent them from eating their truma. They may eat their truma immediately once they've purified themselves. And the day passes by, it becomes sunset, they can eat their truma already. This was the whole point. That when can we start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening, from the time that the Kohanim can enter to eat their truma, and when is that? Tzeitzah kokavim. But maybe they can't yet eat their truma because they have to wait until the next day when they're completely pure. No, says the Gemara. They're already pure enough to be able to eat their truma, even though the kapara will come only the next day when they offer their kapara offering. Says the Gemara. Umimai. How do we know? Dahai uba hashemesh, bias hashemesh, vahai v'taher. And this, how do we know that when it says, and the sun comes, that it refers to the sun setting? Vahai v'taher, and this purification, which is the issue that we were discussing a few moments ago, is tahar yoma, that the day is purified. What else could it be? As he says over here, and the sun sets and it is purified, is one phrase, meaning that the sun will set, the air will clear, and the stars will emerge. Dilma, we continue on Amud Beit of Daf Base. Perhaps bias oirohu, maybe it means the setting of the sun. Umay v'taher, and what does it mean that it became pure? Tahar gavra, it means the person will become purified. At the very beginning of sunset, he will go and immerse himself. He's going to immerse himself at sunset and offer his sacrifice. And only then will he be able to eat of his truma, which means to say there's a process taking place. How do we know what the translation of these words really means? Did it mean that the sun set and the day cleared away? Maybe it means that the sun sets and then the man has to go immediately to the mikvah, purify himself, offer his sacrifice, and then he can eat his truma. Omar Rabbar Bar Rav Shila, says Rabba Bar Rav Shila, in Cain, if that were to be the case, Leimakra, the verse should say the Yitar, which means to say, and he will become purified. My v'taher, what does it mean? And it became purified? Tahar Yoma. It means that the day became purified. The day cleared away, and that brought the purification necessary that he could already eat his truma. As people say, the sun has set and the day has purified. What does it mean, people say? Omre inshe, a term used to introduce a popular adage or saying. The Talmud incorporates many such sayings to explain the meaning of unusual terms, new ideas, or facts concerning everyday life. So there's an expression. People used to say this expression, just like we have cliches today and we use all sorts of different types of expressions, they also had an expression. The expression was that the sun sets and the day clears away, which means to say, since people were accustomed to saying it this way, when we were speaking about the Kohen who is going to eat his truma, we used the same type of idea where we said that the sun sets and v'taher, and means to say that the day purifies away. B'ma'arava, in the west, it means to say in Eretz Yisrael. What does it mean? The west is Eretz Yisrael. If we look here on the background, in the Babylonian Talmud, Eretz Yisrael is referred to as the west, since it is southwest of Babylonia. In later periods, the customs in Israel were referred to as western, as opposed to the eastern customs of Babylonia. So B'ma'arava, in the west, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to where the Gemara is being written in Bavel, we're reading from the Talmud Bavli. This Gemara that we're reading from was written down in Bavel, and so they're bringing down now the opinion of how things were in Eretz Yisrael. And they said, B'ma'arava, in the west, Ha de Rabba bar Rav Sheila, this expression that we're speaking about of Rabba bar Rav Sheila, who was speaking about the idea that the sun sets and the day purifies away, no Shemiyalahu, they didn't hear of it. Nobody knew about it. And so therefore, they raised a dilemma. Hi, uba hashemish. This that it says, and the sun comes, or the sun has come, bias shimsho hu. Perhaps it is the coming of the sun. Umay v'taher. And what does it mean, they said, when it says v'taher, and it purifies? Tahar yoima. It refers to the day purifying. Or dilma, or perhaps bias oirohu. Maybe they said it refers to the coming of the light, meaning the sun sets. Umay v'taher, and what does it mean? V'taher, tahar gavra. It means that the man purifies himself. The Kohen goes and he purifies himself. It refers to the purification of the person. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael, they attempted to clarify the halacha based on the biblical passage, but were unable to do so. Now, here over on the side, here on the background, it says that they did not hear lo shemiya lahu. This phrase often means exactly what it appears to mean, that they had not heard or were unaware of a particular halacha. Some, however, explain it here in the sense that it is employed elsewhere. They did not accept the particular opinion. Vahadar. Afterwards, pshatula mibraisa. They resolved this whole teaching from a brisa. We said a teaching, an outside teaching, just like the Mishnah. There was a brisa. There was a teaching that answered this whole query. Midikatani bebrisa, since it's taught in the brisa. Siman ledavar, there's a sign for the thing. Tzeit hakochavim. This means when the stars come out. Shma mina, we hear from this. Bias shimsho, who? It refers to the coming of the sun, which means the sun is setting. Umay v'taher, and what does it mean? And it is purified. Tahar yoima. We answered the problem up from a brighter. There was a teaching that came out and said, if you really want to know what this means, it means that the sun sets and the day purifies away. It does not mean to say that the Kohen in any way has to do anything in particular in order to bring his state of purification, which means he has to bring his kapara offering, which he does the next day. So he says over here, they resolved this. Pshatula. Pshatula. This phrase introduces the resolution of a problem that poses no difficulty to a particular sage or opinion, but rather expresses difficulty in understanding a verse or a halachic ruling. Brisa, here again we have this expression. Literally, the word brisa means external or outside, and it is used to refer to Tanaitic material that was not included in the final compilation of the Mishnah. When Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi redacted the collection of Tanaitic material, it was necessary to exclude much of it from the framework of the Mishnah. This material, some of which comprises other collections, is known as Berachot, or external Mishnayot. These Berachot contain variant texts and other important material. We continue. Omar Mar, the master said, remember we're going back to what we learned on the previous page, meaning what we said before this. When can we start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening? From the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. Fine. Everything seems good up until now. Ureminu, the Gemara raised an objection, a contradiction. What exactly is that? we look on the left over here, the Gemara raises a contradiction, an expression used by the Gemara to introduce a contradiction between a biblical or Tanaitic source about to be cited and the source of equal authority that had just been cited, which means we're about to look at an expression here, which is contradictory to what we learned. And the expression is just as powerful in terms of its arguments. It's not that the one is more powerful than the other. Both of these arguments carry the same amount of weight, and we need to weigh the one against the other to eventually find out in which direction we need to go. Where is the answer going to be? How are we going to resolve it? Uruminu, they raised a contradiction. It's taught the following. From when can we start reciting the Keriat Shema? In the evening. Another teaching says, it's at the time that the poor person enters to eat his piece of bread with salt. Interesting. There was another teaching. It was in another brisa. Meaning to say, there was a teaching that said, when do we start reciting Keriat Shema in the evening? When the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. Well, there was another teaching. And the other teaching said, when do we start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening? When the poor person enters to eat his bread with salt. What does that mean exactly? When does the poor person enter to eat his bread with salt? Well, we can think about it. If he's a poor person and he's coming home from work and he needs to eat his meal, he might need some light, or he might need it to be at least that it isn't completely dark, that he can't see his meal. So he's going to come back. There was no electricity in those days. They only had lights such as candles or lamps or whatever it was, and he was a poor fellow. Perhaps he didn't even have the means to afford the candle or the lamp. He didn't have any oil. And therefore, when he came back home, he needed sufficient light to be able to eat his bread with salt. And this is the correct time that one can already start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening, because it's the time when the poor man is going to have his evening meal. Until when? Ad sha'a she'omed lipater mitok su'udato. And the correct time for reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening is until this poor man stands up to exempt himself from his meal. When he leaves the meal, that's the final time that you can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening. Meaning already in this brisa, we've learned some interesting points. In the Mishnah, we learned when can you start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening, because we learned ubeshoch becha, when you lie down. When do you lie down? We learned various opinions when a person lies down. Ultimately, people lie down throughout the evening. And until when can we say the Keriat Shema in the evening? Well, there was an opinion that said until the third of the evening, and there was an opinion that said until chatzot, and that's the midnight. And then there was an opinion that said already until the early morning. As long as the morning hadn't dawned yet, the pillar of dawn didn't come about, you could still say Keriat Shema. Yet there's another brisa, and the other brisa tells us that the time for reciting Keriat Shema has nothing to do with what we called Beshoch Becha previously. In fact, what we called Beshoch Becha previously refers to a poor man who comes in to eat his evening meal, to eat his supper, and then when he retires from his supper, that already is the end of what's called the time of going to sleep. Already he's going to sleep because perhaps he doesn't have any lights, he's not able to do anything, and he goes to sleep at that point in time. Therefore, the correct time for reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening is from the time that the poor person comes in. He eats his bread. When he's finished his meal, then already that's the time when the Keriat Shema ends. And a person should have recited the Keriat Shema by that time. Sefer, the end part. Vadai pliga amas nisin. Says the Gemara, the end part is certainly an argument against our Mishnah. Our Mishnah told us you could recite the Keriat Shema until the end of the first watch. How many watches are there? Well, it could be 3, there could be 4, 3 hours, 4 hours for each watch, depending on how we understand it. But there's still a good amount of time to recite Keriat Shema. Chatzot, midnight, 6 hours worth of time to recite Keriat Shema. Then we learned really the rabbis had told us this in order to prevent us from stumbling, and then ultimately we might come to say the Keriat Shema in the wrong time, it'll be too late. So they said chatzot, and then we learned, no, actually you could recite the Keriat Shema right unto Amud HaShachar. Well, that's like, it could be 9 hours worth of evening, 10 hours, 11 hours, depending on how long the evening is. Yet according to this brisa, it's very strange. We can only recite the Keriat Shema until the poor man gets up to leave from eating his meal. Says the Gemara, certainly the last part of the Mishnah, the Sefer, remember we learned that word before in the previous Shiur, the Sefer, the last part, Vadai Pliga Amas Nisin, is certainly an argument against our Mishnah. Reisha, well, what about the first part? The Reisha and the Sefer. The Reisha, the first part. Mi Lema Pligi Amas Nisin? Can we say that it is an argument? It's disagreeing with our Mishnah. Is this against the Mishnah? When we say that the poor man enters to eat his bread with salt, is that against the principle of the time when the Kohanim enter to eat their truma? Now over here on the side, we take a look over here on our Mishnah, Mas Nisin. This phrase may be used in general terms to refer to the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, or specifically to the Mishnah that the Talmud is now discussing. It does not necessarily refer to the specific Mishnah at hand, and may refer to any Mishnah of the 6 orders. Matnitin, from the word Mishnah, matnita, and then in, which refers to our in Aramaic, our Mishnah. No, the Gemara answers, no. Oni v'kohen chad shiura hu. You should know something. There's no discrepancy in terms of the time when the Kohen enters to eat his truma and the time that the poor man comes to eat his bread with salt. Oni v'kohen chad shiura hu. Comes out that the time that the poor man is entering to eat his bread and salt is the same time as the Kohen who now can enter to have his truma. Uruminu. Look at the notes over here. The time of the poor person and the time of the Kohen are one and the same. This explanation is based on a fundamental principle of Talmudic thought. Do not intensify disputes. Whenever possible, what initially seem to be contradictory opinions are shown to actually be the same opinion expressed differently. Even when it is clear that a dispute does exist, an attempt is made to minimize the scope of the argument and find as many points of agreement between the opposing opinions as possible. Uruminu, the Gemara continues, a contradiction is raised. We had this word just a few paragraphs ago. A contradiction is raised. Me'ei Masai, says another brisa, or in this case it's from a Tosefta. Me'ei Masai matchinin nikros Keriat Shema ba'arvis. From when can we start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening? Which means there was another teaching. There was a teaching about reciting it when the Kohen enters to eat his truma. There happened to be a teaching that was floating around that said that the time for reciting Keriat Shema is when the poor man begins to enter and he eats his bread with salt. And in fact, there was a third teaching. The third teaching that was floating around amongst the different academies was the following. It's the time when people enter to eat their bread on the evenings of Shabbos. Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of the great Tana, Rabbi Meir. So we have 3 teachings now about reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening. One opinion is speaking about it from the Kohen's point of view. Another opinion is speaking about it from the poor person's point of view. And yet a third opinion is speaking about it from the point of view of everybody who eats their meal on Shabbos. Now, when people eat their meal on Shabbos, when are they usually going to eat their meal? At the beginning of the evening, in the early evening. In fact, it could be that people eat their meal of Shabbos already while it's just about the time when it's just about dark. When exactly this period? This is the teaching of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim omrim, and the sages say, Misha she'akohanim zakain le'echol b'trumatan. The time when the Kohanim merit to eat their truma. What does it mean that they merit? Over here we see in the translation when the priests are eligible to partake of their truma. And when are they eligible for this? Siman ladavar. There is a sign to prove when the Kohanim can finally eat their truma after going through the day because of ritual impurity. Teita kokavim. It's at the time that the stars come out. V'afal pi she'ein re'aya ledavar. And even though there's no real proof for the matter, zeiche ledavar. There's a hint. What is that? Shene'emar, I'll prove to you that the correct time to begin reciting the Keriat Shema is actually when the stars come out. Not because I have a proof that I know for sure this is the reason why, I'm 100% certain, but there is a hint in the matter. What does the hint say? It says, Shene'emar. A pasuk comes from the book of Nehemiah in Tanakh. It says that they were rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. And while they were rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, there was a lot of opposition against them that the generation were preventing them from continuing with their building. But they wanted to continue building the second Beis HaMikdash. And so what did they do? They protected themselves and they stood on guard that while they were busy building the second Beis HaMikdash, the Jewish people were on guard that if anybody should attack them, they would fight back. And this would, of course, avoid the situation that they would have to give up on building the second temple. So the pasuk says, "Va'anachnu osim b'melacha." We'll do our work. V'chetziam machazikim barumachim, and half of the people will hold their swords. Me'alot hashachar ad tzeit kokavim. Half of them are going to hold onto their swords from alot hashachar, which we learned before in the previous shiur, from when the dawn breaks through, when the dawn comes about, ad tzeit kokavim. When are they going to continue doing this? Until the stars come out. Does that yet prove that when the stars come out, you should say the Keriat Shema? Or what proof is there about that? V'omer. And it also says another pasuk. Also, just 2 psukim away from the previous pasuk, it says, V'hayu lanu halayla mishmar, and it will be for us that the evening, the laila, will be for guarding, v'hayom melacha, and the day will be for work, which means to say they're going to be on guard in the evening and they're going to be working during the day. So what is this all about? What do I learn from all of this? My v'omer, what do I need this v'omer for? What is it coming to teach? So here he says over here, from here we ascertain that the day ends with the emergence of the stars. However, even before analyzing these sources, the Gemara seeks to clarify a confusing element in the Tosefta. In their biblical proof, the rabbis do not suffice with one verse, but rather they say, and it says, and they start an additional verse. What is added by this use of and it says, v'omer? Why did I need the second part of this teaching when one verse could have sufficed? It seems superfluous, as the entire proof appears in the first verse. V'chi tema, because you might say, Miki arva shimsha le'Eliyahu. You might say that the night begins when the sun sets. Ve'inhu demakshki umakdemi. And these people just happen to be working a little bit later, and they come to work a little bit earlier. Tashma, says the Gemara, come and hear. Listen carefully. Here's how it works. V'hayu lanu halayla mishmar. The entire night time is the mishmar, is the guarding. V'hayom melacha, and the day is melacha, which means they didn't come early to work, and they didn't leave late from work, and therefore you can rely upon earlier times and later times as you wish to, but rather, or earlier time, depending on how you look at it, but rather, those were the very times in which they performed their work. So the time between dawn and the emergence of the stars is explicitly referred to as day, proving that night begins with the emergence of the stars. Night time begins with the emergence of the stars. On the note over here, we see on the left-hand side that we're establishing the time for the recitation of Shema, Kvias Zmanei Keriat Shema. And he says the following note. These attempts to determine the time for the Shema raise the question, why did no one express the time to recite Shema in terms of hours? We will learn below that hours were in fact used to gauge time. The reason is not only because timepieces were rare in this era, But more importantly, because of the desire to correlate the times for the recitation of Shema as much as possible with the times when people actually went to sleep and arose, which varied in accordance with the changing lengths of the day and night. Fixed hours rendered this impossible. In other words, it was impossible for the rabbis to say, do you know when you can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening? From 6 p.m., from 7 p.m., from 8 p.m. Why could they not say such a thing? Because the day is different. In summer, night begins later. In winter, night begins earlier. How are we going to express to people this difference between the changes of the night time relative to summer and winter? We use normal activities of different people, and through the activities of what they do, we are able to establish exactly what time is called this principle of Tzeit HaKochavim, when the stars come out. The Gemara continues, you might think, in other words, in analyzing the three opinions regarding the beginning of the period for the recitation of the evening Shema, the Gemara begins with the supposition that you might think the following. You might think that the poor man and those people, in other words, who are entering to eat their Shabbos meal, is one and the same time. You might think such a thing, first of all. If you'll come to say that the poor man and the Kohen are really one and the same time, meaning the poor man who enters in order to have his evening meal with his salt, and you want to call that the same time period as when the Kohen is able to eat his truma in the evening, you'll be saying a very interesting statement. You'll be saying that the Chachamim hayinu Rabbi Meir. You'll be saying that the Chachamim are actually saying exactly the same thing as Rabbi Meir, which means we've got a problem. If the Chachamim were saying the same thing as Rabbi Meir, you wouldn't need both opinions, which means the Chachamim are not saying like Rabbi Meir. They're saying something different. Let's read inside the note over here to clarify. It might enter your mind to say that the time when the poor person typically eats his meal and the time when ordinary people eat their Shabbos evening meal are one and the same time, since in both cases, those eating would seek to begin their meals as early as possible, as for different reasons, they are unable to kindle additional lights to illuminate their meal. And if you say that the time of the poor person's meal and the time when the priest is purified and permitted to partake of his truma are one and the same time, then the opinion of the rabbis is identical to that of Rabbi Meir. What is their disagreement? Ella, but rather, Shma Mina, we learn from all of this. Here's the message. Oni shiura lechud, that the poor person who is going to be eating his meal with his salt is actually one period of time. The Kohen, shi'ur lechud, and the Kohen who is going to enter to eat his truma is a different time period. No, says the Gemara. That's not correct. Oni the Kohen, chad shi'uruhu. You should know something. The period of the poor man and the Kohen is really the same period. V'oni u'bnei Adam, and the poor man, next to the average person who's eating his Shabbos meal on the Shabbos night time, lav chad shi'urahu. Those times are different. Accordingly, the opinion expressed by the Tana in our Braita is identical to that of the other Tanaim, and only Rabbi Meir disagrees with them. Says the Gemara, v'oni v'kohen chad shi'urahu. Really? Is the time that the poor man who's eating his meal at night with his salt the same time as the Kohen? Is that what you're telling me? Urimenu, again that word comes up, a contradiction is raised, meaning there's another teaching that comes to say that's not correct. The other teaching says the following. There was another brisa which says the following. Me'ei masai matchilin nikrot shema ba'arevin. From when can we start reciting the Keriat Shema? In the evening, answers the Gemara. Misha shekadesh hayom ba'arvei Shabbatot. It's at the time that the day of Erev Shabbos becomes sanctified. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, this is very interesting. Everybody will remember that at the beginning of the Mishnah, we learned that the time to start reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening is from Tzeitzah Kokavim, and then Rabbi Eliezer said to us that we can say the Keriat Shema up until the end of the first watch. Now, in this teaching over here, this other brisa, it says, from when can we start reciting Keriat Shema in the evening? And it does not say Tzeitzah Kokavim. It says over here from the time that the Erev Shabbos, when the day becomes sanctified, that is when we can begin reciting the Keriat Shema. And everybody knows that the time that we sanctify Shabbos is a lot earlier than Tzeitzah Kokavim. Everybody knows that we have to light our Shabbos candles at least 18 minutes before sunset. If you live in Yerushalayim, 40 minutes before sunset. And then sunset will take X amount of time. Let's say it's 18 minutes. Let's say it's 20 minutes, whatever time period sunset takes exactly. And then afterwards will be Tzeitzah Kokavim. The point being that according to this opinion here of Rabbi Eliezer, the time that we begin reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening is from when the day of Shabbos becomes sanctified. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Rabbi Yeshua says, remember, there are always going to be these arguments between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. They're on opposite sides of each other. Rabbi Eliezer is always usually following in accordance with the teachings of Beit Shammai. Rabbi Yeshua is following in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel. Rabbi Eliezer said from the time when the day of Shabbos becomes sanctified. Rabbi Yeshua says, Misha she'akohanim metoharim le'echol b'trumatam. From the time that the Kohanim purify themselves so they can eat their truma. Rabbi Meir Omer, a third opinion, says, Misha she'akohanim tovlin le'echol b'trumatam. At the time that the Kohanim are immersing in order to eat their truma. Omar lo Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda answered back, and he says to Rabbi Meir, V'halo kohanim mi ba'od yom hem tovlim. But the kohanim are going to immerse while it is still daytime. You, Rabbi Meir, come along and you say from the time that the kohanim immerse to eat their truma, not in accordance with the opinion that the day passes by and the purifies away, and then off he goes and he eats his truma, and at that time it's Tzeitzah Kokavim. But rather, Rabbi Meir says the moment he goes to immerse himself in the mikvah, which of course is far before the time that the stars are going to come out, that already is the time we can recite the Keriat Shema. Or Malu Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda said, V'halo kohanim ba'od yom hem tovlim. But the kohanim are immersing while it is still daytime. That's a bit of an argument. Rabbi Chanina Omer, and Rabbi Chanina says his opinion is Misha she'oni niknas le'echol pito b'melach. Rabbi Chanina says it's the time when the poor person enters to eat his bread together with salt, which means to say this was another brisa. As we said before, when the Gemara was compiled, before the Gemara was compiled, before the Mishnah was compiled, all the heads of the different yeshivas would be teaching the oral Torah to their students. And there were certain opinions that went around. When Rabbi Yehuda had to compile the Mishnah, he needed to include those opinions that everybody knew about. It was clear. But at the same time, there were all these other opinions, and they also carried tremendous weight. And because they carry tremendous weight, we need to include those opinions. So we're asking a question about reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening. In order to clarify exactly when we can recite Keriat Shema in the evening, we need to know all the opinions that exist. And so therefore the Gemara is bringing in the form of the Breitas, in the form of the Toseftas, all the other opinions, so that we can compare them and ultimately come to a conclusion to know exactly when is the time that we can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening. Rabbi Achai, this is one of the rabbis. For Omri la Rabbi Acha, some say it was Rabbi Acha, not Achai, but Acha. It's possible they weren't quite sure. Did they hear correctly? Was it Rabbi Achai who said it, or was it Rabbi Acha who said it? Omer, he says, Misha sherov b'nei Adam niknasin laseif. At the time that the majority of people enter so that they can eat their meal, that they recline In those days when they would eat their meal, they would be reclining. They didn't sit like we sit at a table today in an ordinary chair sitting at the table, but they usually lay down on the top of a bed leaning to the side, and so they would recline. And the word reclining therefore tells us that they were going to eat the meal when they would enter to recline, which means that they were going to eat their meal. Let us take a look at some of the comments so far before we continue. Here are all the different opinions. Let's take a look at these opinions. According to Rav Hai Gaon, the reasoning of the sages of the Braita is as follows. These are all the opinions we've just discussed. Let's see them in more detail. It will help us understand exactly what we're learning. Rabbi Eliezer says that from the time when the day becomes sanctified on the eve of Shabbat. What is his reasoning? Night begins with sunset. The verse "and the sun sets" refers to the beginning of sunset. That's what Rabbi Eliezer said, from the time when the day becomes sanctified on the eve of Shabbat. Because we spoke about this idea of the sun setting, and then the day clears away. When is that? At the beginning of sunset, says Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua said, from the time when the priests are eligible to eat their truma. When exactly is that? What is the reasoning? Night begins with the appearance of stars. The verse "and the sun sets" refers to the end of sunset. This makes sense. Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning referred to the beginning of sunset. Rabbi Yeshua's opinion referred to the end of sunset. Rabbi Meir, from when the priests immersed themselves in order to partake of their truma. He agrees with Rabbi Yeshua, but advances the time by a few minutes. So again, when the priests immersed themselves in order to partake of their truma, which means that they're going to eat the truma just after sunset, but they're going to immerse first, and so therefore that's the time that already one can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening. Rabbi Hanina, from when the poor person enters to eat his bread with salt, he rejects any connection between sunset and the recitation of Shema. The time of lying down is determined based solely on ordinary human activity. So Rabbi Hanina's reasoning in terms of reciting the Keriat Shema in the evening has nothing to do with sunset, but rather when people get ready to go to bed. Because the pasuk says, "B'shochbecha uvekomecha," you shall recite these words when you lie down and when you stand up. Lying down has nothing to do with sunset, like everybody else is speaking about. Although it makes sense. I mean, when do people lie down to go to sleep? At sunset. So everybody else here has the opinion of sunset. But Rabbi Hanina says, I hold according to when people go to sleep already. And when would that be? From the time that the poor person already is getting ready for bed. He goes into his house when it becomes the first moment of darkness. Already he's in his house. He's eating his bread. The meal ends already very shortly after. And therefore, that's the time for reciting Keriat Shema. Rabbi Acha, from the time when most people enter to recline, that was the last opinion that we read above. He agrees with Rabbi Hanina in the fact that it's the time that we go to when we're reclining, going to sleep, but argues that the determination must be based on the general population rather than on the behavior of the poor. So whereas Rabbi Hanina was discussing the issue of a poor person, well, actually a poor person is going to be slightly earlier because he has no light in his house. Whereas the average person will go to bed slightly later because he has light. He may not have electricity, but he has a candle of sorts, he has a lamp of sorts, whatever it is, he has some light in his home. So the average person who is not so poor that he can't afford some light in his house, we can follow his opinion and say when the average person reclines, that would be the time to recite the Keriat Shema. And hence we see a list here of all the different opinions of when we can begin to recite the Keriat Shema in the evening. Now the Gemara is going to continue and describe the different opinions one against the other. And ultimately, when we find out the different opinions, who is earlier, who is later, why are they saying all these different things in the way that they express it, and so on and so forth, we will come to a final conclusion and we will understand exactly how to know when we recite the Keriat Shema. As everybody knows, the correct time for reciting Keriat Shema, as we learned in the halacha together already, is at Tzeitzah Kokavim, when the stars come out. That is the correct time. In general, we already learned we could look on our timetable, which we looked at last week, and that will give us the actual time of when we can recite the Keriat Shema in the evening, when we daven Ma'ariv, and of course, if we daven Ma'ariv before that, in accordance with various opinions, as we'll learn later on, we would still have to recite the Keriat Shema again when it becomes the evening. So we've reached the end of the Shear for today, and I thank you very much for joining me. This is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. Thanks so much for joining me. And as I say, always, if you'd like to be in touch or you'd like to join us for a Shear, please visit my site and be in touch with me. I would be delighted to be in touch with you. In the meantime, I thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the Shear. If you did, please click on the like button, click on the subscribe button to subscribe to my channel, and click on the bell next to the subscribe button so that you will be notified in the future of new shiurim as they become available. Thanks for everything, and I look forward to being in touch and for another shiur. Wishing you all the best. Take care. Bye-bye and shalom, shalom.